Cool. Welcome to Lambda School's, get a little light on me, free Intro to Web Development course. This is week 2. For those of you just joining us, we have had 4 lessons already, and we're kind of in the middle of getting into some intermediate JavaScript. But this course is intended to kind of show you the basics of what web development is and how we use it. And where to go from here, right? So we started at the very beginning. We started at even conceptual, what is computer programming, what is web development, worked our way through some HTML and CSS, and then jumped right into JavaScript. JavaScript is the programming language that powers the internet. And so it's really important to get a good understanding of the fundamentals of this language before you really branch off into other parts of web development. And so this course is going to take us through kind of the 0 to 10. We're going to start from the very beginning, and we're going to go to about, I would say, 10, maybe 5 out of 100, right? We're just going to get our feet wet. We're going to start learning some programming concepts. We're going to start getting some stuff on the page. We did that last week with HTML and CSS. And then we're going to start writing an actual computer programming language, which is JavaScript. So this is the free class. We do have a full-time 7-month immersive course that really starts where we end here, and it expands on all of this. Right? This is just the tip of the iceberg. Right? The majority of the material is in our full course. And so we take this is where we, at the end of this course, it's where we'd love you to be with the knowledge of everything we've taught in this course when you start the full-time course, and then take it from there and spend 7 months really immersing yourself in computer programming and web development, and building some really awesome things, and coming out the end an employable software developer. And so I talked previously a little bit about kind of our business model and how we operate, and it's really awesome. That's why I'm here. It's because we offer our full program for 0 upfront, nothing. You don't pay a dime to us, and you actually don't pay a dime to us in our full course until you have graduated and gotten a job and you're making more than $50,000 a year. And so it really helps us align our motivation with your motivation, and that's just to get you to the point where you're an employable software developer, and you can continue on your journey in the professional world. And so I think it's really amazing that we're able to offer this for free, essentially, until we get you a job. I mean, well, we don't get you a job. You go get you get a job, but we give you the skills necessary to go get that job. And so it helps. We consider it really de-risking. If at the end of this program, if you find yourself unemployable or you can't get a job as a software developer, the only thing you've lost out on is your time, and you're free and clear, can go on. And so the motivations behind what we teach in this class is to get you a job, and because of that, we partner with top industry people to constantly audit our curriculum, to constantly have a say in what we're teaching. We employ all professional software developers as instructors, and all of our software developers all of our instructors have worked professionally in the industry. We know what it takes to be a developer. We know the skills that are required to be a developer, and we understand we have kind of a pulse on technology, right? When you're a software developer, you gain a huge network of colleagues, and those are people that we reach out to all the time. We are constantly auditing and changing our curriculum to make sure that we are at the highest level of curriculum in this course. In doing so, we will be able to pass that on to you, and you will leave the skills you'll leave Lambda school with skills necessary to be a professional software developer. So it's a little bit about our payment model and our curriculum. That is our full-time program. This, though, is our free intro program, just to give you a taste of what it's like, and to be able to kind of get your feet wet and code a little bit and continue on if you so choose from here. So tonight we are going to be revisiting functions. I know we talked about them in our intro to JavaScript lesson, which was last Wednesday, and it kind of ran over them, right? And all of that stuff that I talked about on Wednesday, I'm going to talk about again tonight, but we're gonna go a little bit slower and a little bit more detail. And I'd love for you to ask questions during this lesson, and I'll hopefully get to them. Learning functions and the concepts introduced tonight is pivotal to really understanding JavaScript. So we're going to take an entire lesson and re-go over that material that we talked about on Wednesday with functions. So let's get started. You will see that we are in Replit tonight, and we're going to be in Replit for the entire week. So those of you that aren't familiar with Replit yet, there is a sign-up link, and I think that we have emailed it to you, or it has been posted in our Slack channel, if you're a member of that Slack channel, or I should say. It's to join a classroom, and I've released our latest project for tonight. And let me move this over. Open that. Great. Yeah, this is considered a code sandbox environment. This is a really great place to write code, be able to run it, and see it appear in the right-hand side. So let's jump right in, right? What is a function? We've talked about it on Wednesday. Let's talk about it a little bit more, right? We have talked about data types, conditional statements, variables. We've talked about all of these little things that make up this awesome language. But in the long run, we need something to kind of wrap all of that language into small computable bits that we can pass around and reuse anywhere we want. That's where functions come into play. So anytime you run computer software, anytime you run or use anything in a web page, remember I said like, putting my mouse over run right here, that's actually a function that runs that made that slide up, right? This is all functions. I hit this drop down, that's a function that made that appear. Okay, so all of this functionality is run by functions. And so it's really important because they are everywhere, and we want to write all of our code into functions. It's really important to get this stuff down. Also, another reason we want to use functions is to be able to keep our code, what we call in programming, dry, D-R-Y, which is don't repeat yourself, D-R-Y. Don't repeat yourself, right? So we don't want to, say we're going to do something like this. We'll say const 2 equals 1 plus 1. We don't want to do that and then say const another 2, 1 plus 1. Right? We only want one of those. We don't want to ever repeat ourselves. So if we find ourselves writing the same little bits of code over and over again and always the same, then that's just like the key indicator that we should take that code and put it in a function. And then we'll just be able to call that function whenever we want. It makes our code less complex, easier to read, easier to follow along with. It makes our code much cleaner, and be able to really, and we'll see if we can go in and change one thing and make it happen across many places in our code. That's the beauty of functions. So let's get into it. Like I said, well, I didn't say this on Wednesday, but there are 3 different ways to write a function. First and foremost is the function keyword, right? So we can say function, just like var or const or let, and then we give it a name. We can say we'll say my function, right? So that's the name of it. That's essentially like the variable name that we give var, const, or let, right? So we say function, we tell the browser that we are going to create a function, and then we give it a name. After that, we are going to give it an open and closing parentheses. The open and closing parentheses is going to come into play in a little bit, but every function declaration needs one of these, or needs this parentheses. Finally, we are going to give it open and closing what we call curly brace. Okay, so if you don't know where it is, look to the key on the right side of your P key on your keyboard, press shift and hit that, and you should get an open curly brace, and the one next to that should be the closed curly brace. We use this quite a bit in programming, so get used to understanding where they are on your keyboard. Usually you'll see a function written like this, where the open brace is up here, the curly brace is down here, and then we write some code here. Okay, so this is the first way to use a function. Second way is just to create a variable, right? So let's say const, and then we'll say another function, and we'll equal that to the keyword function. Okay, we'll equal that to the keyword function, and then from here on it looks pretty similar. We just give it those open and closing parentheses, open and closing curly brace, and we can write code here. All right. There are slight differences between these two that are a little more advanced and outside of the scope of this lesson, but for the most part, they're very similar, almost the same. The third way is a way that was introduced when the ES6 version of the language was introduced, which was 2015, and then it looks exactly like that second one, except in this case, we do not use the function keyword. Okay, we just give it curly or the parentheses, and then we have a unique symbol that we call the arrow, which is an equal sign and a greater than sign, and then give it an open and close parentheses. So this is a ES6 valid way of writing a function. It's a little bit shorter than writing out the function keyword. This does give us some extended functionality that is outside of the scope of this lesson, but just know that there is something different about this, although really fairly similar, right? So just like I said, there are some 3 slight subtle differences between the 3 of these, but we're going to use the top 2 for this course, and then when you get into the full course, you'll learn about the significance of the arrow and why we would use that arrow function. But for now, we're going to stick to the first 2. Oop, I'm going to leave that there so that we can keep that as notes. We'll use those first 2 in this course. So now that we know how to write a function, let's learn how to build functionality and actually call a function. So I'm going to use the function keyword, and I'm going to give it a name that means something, right? So from this point on, whenever you're using JavaScript or writing any code whatsoever, you are going to want to give your functions names that actually convey what they do. You're going to want to give your variables names that mean something. You don't want to do something like this, RA equals bam. And then somewhere in your code, you're going to see A somewhere, and you're going to be like, I have no idea what that means. You know, this is buried somewhere deep in our code. And then we see that variable, and we're like, I don't know what A is, right? I have no idea what that means. If I say first name, and then you see first name in your code somewhere, you can assume that this is going to be somebody's first name, right? So giving your variables meaningful names and giving your functions meaningful names really goes a long way, because we are not only, right now we're writing code for ourselves, but in the future and in a professional development environment, we're not writing code for ourselves. We're writing code to be used and read on a team. So you want your coworker to be able to look at your code, to read your code, and to be able to understand very quickly what's going on. We also do this for ourselves. You are writing code right now that you might go and take a look at in 6 months from now. And the easier you make it on yourself to read that code and understand what's going on, the better it'll be. And that happens all the time in the professional workplace as well, where you wrote code 6 months to a year ago and you have to go in and change something or fix something in it. It makes it way easier. It makes your job a lot easier if you give it names that matter. So from now on, just try to use names that actually mean something. And I'll try to do the same, although I am guilty of giving it the random A here and there. But I'll try my hardest not to. So in this function, we have logs. The function's name is logs hello. So you can deduce from that what this function is supposed to do, right? We're going to use the console log method, and we're just going to say hello. Pretty simple, right? So we have our first function built. It is called logs hello, and we have when we run it, we're going to console log hello. So the next part is how to run a function, right? I talked about this last Wednesday, but for those that don't remember, I consider a function to be like a car, where you have this car and it's sitting in your driveway, and you go and sit in it and nothing's going to happen, right? If I just type logs hello and press run, nothing's going to happen. It's going to tell me that that's a function. That's all it's going to do. It's just sitting in our driveway. What we have to do is we have to turn the car on, okay? And the cool thing about this car is it only runs for as long as it needs to. And so it's going to do the task that we've told it to do, and then it's going to shut itself off. And we do that, we start it by giving the parentheses signs, okay? That means run that function. And so then it's going to say, okay, I'm going to go find that function. There it is. And now I am going to start it. And it starts it until it gets to the end, and then it stops it. All right, it does that automatically for us. So, make it a little bit bigger. Now you'll see this white is our console log, and there we have hello in there. Pretty awesome. And now we can do this as many times as we want, right? Logs hello. Got 5 times on there. We're going to see hello 5 times. Now, anywhere I want it, anytime I want to console log hello, I can just write this function out. It's pretty awesome. So just to go back through it again, we're going to use the function keyword to tell our browser or whoever's running the JavaScript that we have a function. We're going to give the function a name. This is just like a variable name, in that we can pass this variable around anywhere we want, right? We're going to do the open and closing parentheses, open and closing curly bracket, and our code inside of here, whatever functionality we want to give it. Then to call it, we're going to use the name, and we are going to use the open and closing parentheses. And in a moment, we're going to put stuff in it. But for now, we're just going to use it, and we can use it anywhere we want. Remember, these definitely needs our spelling first. We got hello, and then we have function logs hello because we haven't started it yet. We need to put those parentheses in order to start it. Also, if you don't want to start it, don't put those parentheses. And you might be asking yourself, well, why wouldn't we want to start it? There are times, and we'll go over those on Thursday, that we don't want to automatically start a function. We just want to pass it around like a variable. So we don't use the parentheses. But for now, we're going to use those parentheses. All right, we have our first function written, and now let's talk about how we pass data into functions. So we pass data into functions by using parameters and arguments. Arguments. Okay. Parameters and arguments. And there's very little difference between the two of these. They do have different names. You might just hear them be called arguments, but the name is a parameter. So if you see something being called an argument and you're like, well, that's not an argument, that's a parameter. Just understand that they're pretty interchangeable, but they do have little specific meanings to them. So let's talk about them. Let's write a function out, and we're going to say adds two numbers. So that's the name of our function, right? Adds two numbers. And then we're going to give it an open and closing parentheses, open and closing bracket. We're going to split those brackets so that we can write some code in here. Okay. So in this code, I want to add two numbers together. And let's just do this real quick. Let's say const sum. So we're writing a function, or we're writing a variable inside of our function. And let's just say 2 plus 5. And then let's just console log it. Okay. So all I'm doing is creating a variable. I'm assigning it. Remember, a single equals is an assignment operator, unlike the triple equals we learned about on Thursday. We're assigning it to whatever 2 plus 5 is. So it should be 7, right? Hopefully, unless the computers are broken or we're in some sort of weird alternative universe. And then we're just going to log it out. Remember, console log is just for us, the developers, and we're going to talk about what we would do a little bit later if we actually wanted to use that number. So let's console log it out. Oh, if you'll notice, one thing I didn't do was start the car, right? There we go. Okay, so now I've used the name of the function and I've given it those parentheses, and so now it should run all the code in here until it gets to the end and then stop it. There we go. We have console logged 7. Well, now I want to get the sum of 2 and 9, right? It's really not going to work. I mean, it can work. Add two numbers. Again, we get 2 and 9. And then we say, add two numbers again. And okay, now we got 7 and 11. But if we look here now, we realize that we're using the same exact code over and over again. And this is really going against all of our ideas of keeping our code dry. So what we want to do is we want to figure out a way to use this code over and over again. And that's where parameters come in. And so parameters are the ability to pass data to our objects. We want to pass two different numbers to our object, right? Or to our function. And so instead of that adds two numbers again, we're going to use parameters. And so we're going to be able to pass data to our function. And we do that inside of these parentheses. I know we've seen this before, but it's pretty awesome stuff. So first one, we're going to call it first name. Remember, in here, when I give this name in here, it's essentially doing the same thing as name equals, we don't know yet, right? It's essentially doing this. It is assigning a variable to whatever argument we give it. Okay, so we're creating a variable called first name. We're saying we don't know yet what that's going to equal. And we can give it more than one parameter by using a comma. So comma separated parameters, and we can actually give it as many as we want. There's probably an upper limit on this, but I've never reached it. You probably don't want to go that far in it, but we can give it as many as we want. It doesn't have to be 1 or 2. It can be 10, 15, 20, 30 if we wanted to, right? We'll just call this one second number. All right, so now we have, and we'll just kind of, why did I say first name? That's not a name, it's a number. That would have been very confusing if for the next programmer that saw that, and they would have been like, why is there a name in here? Right? So that's the kind of the, goes back to giving our variables names that matter and we can understand. All right, so now we have first number and we have second number. And now what we want to do is we want to add those two numbers together, right? And so instead of this 2 plus 5 here, let's just do first number plus second number and return or console log that sum. And you're going to be like, well, we don't know what those are. Like, why, how is that a possibility to add those two things together if they're not, we don't know what they are yet. And that's the beauty of functions, is they're not run. None of this code is run until we put the key in the car and start it, right? Until we run that function, none of this code is run. It is a variable, and that's all it is. When we put the keys in the car and start it, we better give it some numbers. Otherwise, we're going to get not a number or undefined or something weird. It's like, oh, we broke that now, right? So how do we give it? How do we pass that data to the function? Well, we do it using arguments. The arguments, we give it just like in the same exact order as the parameter. So if the order mattered here, so if this is instead of adds, this will subtract two numbers where the order actually matters, we need to make sure to give it the numbers in order. So we're going to say in this case 2, comma 9, right? So that's what we had before. We had 2 and 9. So now what this is doing is this is now saying when this runs this one and only time, it's now going to say let first name equal first name. Let's still do that. Number equal 2, and it's going to say let second number equal 9. That's what this is doing now. Now the first one always goes in the first. The second one always goes in the second. We can give these whatever names we want. Remember, we could have given this A and B if we wanted to, or param1, param2 if we wanted to, but we chose to give it names with meaning. Okay, so this is always going to align with the first item. This is always going to align with the second item. And we can look at that and see if that's true. Let's do that real quick. Console log first number, and then we can say console log second number. Let's just check that out before we do anything in here. Let's look and see what these. Look at that, and we can actually do it better. First number. Okay. Now we look. First number is 2, second number is 9. What if we switch these around? We can do 90 if we wanted. Now look at that. First number is 9, second number is 2, because the order matters, right? The order matters. If I said 908, then we get first number 908, second number 2. And we can do this multiple times. Let's look at this. Let's say 3 and 1. So we're running this function 2 different times right here, right? And remember that this only is created, we're only assigning it when it's run, and then when it stops, it's all forgotten, okay? So let's look. The first time, first number is 908, second number is 2. The second time we run it, first number is 3, second number is 1. And we can do this over and over again, and it's going to reassign the first and second number every time we run it. So a few things to keep in mind here is that this is going to be assigned to whatever we give it whenever we run it. And it's going to change every time we run it. So don't think that it's ever going to remember what first number was the last time you ran it, or what second number was the last time you ran it. It's going to change every time we run it. Okay, so in this case, this doesn't matter anymore, right? This changes every time we run it. Okay, so let's look, and let's just comment those out, and we're going to say sum. First one is the sum is 910 because 908 plus 2, and we get our sum. The second one is 4 because 3 and 1. And we can do this as many times as we want. So we just created a little adding functionality to a calculator, right? This is exactly what a calculator is doing when you press that plus symbol. It's putting both of those numbers into a function, and it's outputting what they come out with. So this is all, we're writing a computer program now. We're writing a calculator right now. Just using a couple of lines of code and some parameters. Let's go down here. And some arguments. Like I said, you'll hear these called arguments all the time. That's fine. Just understand what whoever says that means. Okay. Cool. So we've written a little adding function. And remember that, especially those of you with previous programming knowledge, these can be any data type we want them to be. They can be numbers, they can be strings, they can be booleans, they can be other functions, which might blow your mind, and we're actually going to talk about that on Friday, or on Thursday, excuse me. They can be anything we want them to be. So just keep that in mind, that we don't have to give them a type, right? Look, if I do think to yourself what would come out right here. It's going to be very, very shocking. Not very shocking, but it's going to be a little weird to you if you've never seen something like this before. But we're going to get Dan 4. It's weird. So using something like first number, I'm assuming that if anyone uses this code, they're going to understand that it needs to be a number. We can do some checking in here on our own and return an error if it's not a number, but for now we're not going to worry about that. We're just going to worry about passing data in as parameters and arguments. So let's now talk about scope once again, right? This is a tricky subject, and scope gets really confusing with functions as we go. So we have to understand that anytime we see an open and a closed curly brace like this, we are not able to access this data outside of it. Okay, so if I say console log first number and run, we're going to get first number is not defined. You're like, well, of course it's defined. I've defined it right there. This is considered inside of the function, but also if I give it something like sum, I'm like, okay, well, I just want to know what the sum is outside of it. And you have to think of why this is true. Sum is not defined, right? Think of why this is true. Remember when I said that when you start a function, that it runs all the code in here, it does whatever we want it to, and then it stops itself and it forgets about all that stuff. So this is new. Everything that's in here is new every time we run the function. So it really makes no sense to be able to look at what sum is outside of it, because that's going to be different. That's different for this than it is for this. It doesn't have a value until we run it, right? So it doesn't, remember, it doesn't remember anything. It forgets everything. It doesn't remember the last time it was run or what it equaled. It doesn't do anything like that. Okay, that's considered function scope, and that's a very introductory topic to it. But just know that if you create a variable or parameters inside of your function, you do not have access to them outside of the function. But conversely, any variables you create outside of a function, so if I say let third num equal 10, let's just go with that 3 and 1. So this should be 4. And look now, 14. So this, anything outside of the function, is what we call global scope. And anything on the global scope, which is not inside of these brackets, right? Anything on the global scope we can access anywhere in our code. So a function can reach outside of it and grab stuff and bring it in, but you cannot reach into a function and grab stuff and bring it out. Quite. So there is a way, you're like, well, if I can't get data out of a function, then what's the point of running a function? Remember I said that console log is just for developers. We don't use console log in production code. That's just for us to see what something is, right? The vast majority, I'm certain that 90% of you have never opened up the console before. Here it is. So if there was going to be a console log in here, it would be in here somewhere. And how would anyone know to look in there for it, right? We need to actually use code coming out of this. So in that case, we need to use something called the return statement. So let's do another function. We're going to call this subtracts two numbers. First num, second num. One thing about this is that we can use the same variable names for both of these, right? Think about why we can do that. So if I say first number and second number, why we can use the same variable names for this one and this one. Think about it for a moment. Well, this all goes back to scope, right? Remember I said that these are in that function scope. So these only exist within the brackets here. And if they only exist there, then I can use the same names here and nothing will change. It's all the same. It only exists in these brackets. So just keep that in mind. I'm going to call it something else just to not confuse, but just know that you can use the same because these do not exist in the global scope. It's only in the function scope. Okay. So let's say we have two numbers and we want to subtract them. Remember that order matters in subtraction, right? So if I say const difference, we're going to say first num minus second num, and then console log difference. Okay, so we have a new function here called subtracts two numbers. We give it the first number, we give it the second number, it's going to find the difference of those two numbers, and then it's going to print it out to the screen. So we're going to say subtracts, and I'll say 10 and 7. And so this is going to be first num is going to equal 10, second num is going to equal 7. So only when this is run this one time, remember, only once is that going to equal that. It's going to create a variable called difference, which is the first number minus the second number, and then we're going to print the difference to the screen. Let's do that, and we'll say difference. There we go. Difference, 3, right? 10 minus 7 is 3. What if we switch those around? In addition, it doesn't matter. In subtraction, it does matter, right? And we're going to get -3 because 7 minus 10 is -3. So subtraction matters. So remember, first one, second one, third one, third one. No matter what the name is, no matter what the type is, it doesn't matter. All right? They're always going to go in order. All right. So we have this thing that's console logging something to us. Like I said, it only logs it to there. We get it undefined here if we remember last time what undefined means. It means this function ran and it can't find, the computer can't find what it came up with. So here enters the return statement. So return does a couple of things for us in a function. First of all, it will stop our function from running. So if I had console log, let's just do this. Let's take this, put that down there. If I run this now, it's never going to console log because return is actually us taking the key out of the car ahead of time, right? We're like, we're gonna. This is where we want to stop. Okay. I know I gave directions for the car to go to McDonald's, but actually I want to go to Taco Bell, and that's where we're going to stop, okay? And I know we passed Taco Bell on the way to McDonald's, all right? So that's our return statement right there. It stops the function from running. The second most important thing it does is it allows us to get data out of the function. So in this case, if I return difference, now I can do something like this. Now I can create a variable called diff, equal it to whatever whatever is returned from this function. Okay, so if I say diff, subtract two numbers, 10 and 7, when it returns, this is all going to get replaced with that. Okay, because that is the return. We have now broken data out of the function. And we can prove that. Let's do this. Difference in function. Difference side function. And we'll just say if on that. Look at that. So I have, what I've done here is I have created a variable and I have equaled it to whatever comes from this. Now I'm console logging it, difference outside a function. We'll say diff. So now we see in here, difference outside a function is 3. Cool, we've broken data out of that function, right? We do not also see a difference in function anywhere here because the return statement stopped the function from running before it got to this line. So you'll probably see an error. Surprised there's no error that says unreachable content outside of or after return statement. So just wanted to show you that. And you might be saying like, well, we're just console logging this right here, right? Like, what does this matter? And true, touche. We are just console logging it outside, but we now found out that we can break it out. So what if I said something like this? I don't want to make it too abstract, but I'll say another diff equals 7 minus diff. Now I can use this wherever I want, right? I'll just do and REPL will see, like, there it is, 4, right? 7 minus whatever came from that function. And the crazier thing, and this is not to confuse you, and this is not going to be part of our assignment tonight or our project tonight or anything. I just want to show you the power of this. What if I said adds two numbers, and I said 12 and diff. Oh, I'll say. Look at this. Now we took data from this function being run, and we've thrown it into another function, which this is just a number, right? This is just 3. That's all it is. And now let's look. 25. We had 12. Whoa. Oh, yeah, because 10. Because I added that 10 in there. Anyways, you can see now the power of getting data out of a function. Like I said, this is a little advanced stuff here. Don't worry about this stuff. Just worry about using your return statement, knowing what the return statement does, being able to assign a variable to whatever we say, whatever the function returns is what we say, how to say it. So whatever subtracts 2 numbers returns when we give it these 2 numbers is what diff is going to be equal to. And there we go. Outside of function is 3. And that's what I've got for you tonight. I know that this is some pretty heavy stuff, so I did want to leave it open for a couple of questions if you have any. So feel free to throw it into chat or the Q&A if you have anything right now. And we'll open it for questions for another couple of minutes. If you don't have anything, totally fine. That means I explained things well, or you're really confused. Let's actually go over here. I'm going to grab this. Well, there's no way of getting over confused by working on it, right? It's playing around with this stuff. Like I said, you can watch me code all day long, and then you won't know how to code. You have to actually go out and code and break things and be frustrated and get things to work. And then, the biggest I think piece of advice I can tell you is, if you somehow get something to work, go back and figure out why it wasn't working before and why it's working now. It'll give you so much insight into it. If you use the return statement after the console log, what do you think is going to happen? I want to think about it. If the return statement comes after the console log, so we're going to say subtracts 2 numbers. Okay, we're going to find that. It's going to make first num equal to 10, second equal to 7. It's then going to create a new variable inside of here called difference. And it's going to be the difference of the 2, which is 3. It's going to go to this next line, and it's going to say console log, so it's going to console log that. And then it's going to go to this next line, it's going to say return difference, so then it's going to stop the function, and it's going to return it. And so we'll see both of them, in function and outside of function, okay? How do we use global constants variables in JavaScript? The value will be the same in and out of the scope of the function. It's the same way I did it up here, right? So I said let third num equal 10, and then I can use that inside of the function, and it's going to be the same in the function and out of the function, okay? If I do something like, no, I don't want to go there. If I give it a new variable inside of a function called third num, that takes precedence, and this one won't matter inside of here. But that's how we do it. This is our global scope. We create a variable outside of it, and we use it inside of it. This isn't the best thing to do. It's fine for right now, but in the future, we want to give everything in our function, we want to pass it in as a parameter. And once again, we will have, I'll post it in Slack and in here. and you can go in and check out these notes. Also, you on Replit now, you have a new project to work on, which is just creating your own functions and getting it to do certain functionality. Getting it to do certain functionality and just playing around with this stuff. Because like I said, it all needs to be played with. You need to spend time on this. This isn't something that you can watch a video and right? I always say that learning how to program is just like learning how to speak a new language. You don't listen to a tape of someone speaking the language and telling you the words, and then all of a sudden you know how to speak that language. You have to go out and use it. You have to go speak it yourself. You have to listen to a lot of stuff. You have to actually continue to use that new language and those new words and those new skills over and over and over and over again until it gets ingrained in your brain. And then you start to realize the little nuances of the differences and why you're doing certain things. So don't expect to go through this 2-week course and be a JavaScript master this weekend, right? You're going to be like, oh my gosh, this only made more questions than it answered. Now I know how to write a function, but like, where would I write a function and how would I do it? And how do I do this? And how do I do that? And that's the beauty of programming. And that's the beauty of learning this stuff is there's so much to learn. And it can seem overwhelming at first, but every step you get and every every achievement you have just has this really great feeling to it. And like I said, it's hard. This stuff isn't easy. It is hard. It can be very frustrating at times. Just keep at it. Keep working at it, and I guarantee it'll come to you. Gregory, I posted the link to the actual code itself. You're more than welcome to click on that link. I'll post it again, and you can actually take this code and play with it yourself. So you don't need to screenshot it or anything. You can just go and play with it. That's what I've got for you tonight, everybody. Thanks so much for joining me. I hope this maybe gave a little bit of a slightly better understanding of functions to you, and I hope you have fun with the project tonight, and make sure that you go into your stand-up meetings and talk with your fellow classmates about it and about the challenges you have, and you might gain some insight into some cool techniques and ways of solving something you hadn't thought of before. And also your PMs are awesome and there to answer questions for you. But that's what I've got for you tonight, everybody. Have a good night, and I'll see you tomorrow.